I made a choice that might seem unconventional to some. I invited my aunt and uncle to my graduation instead of my parents. And the reason behind it? It's because they were the ones who stepped up when no one else would. They paid for everything while I struggled through college, while my parents, who told me they couldn't afford it, kept their distance. Now, here I am, 20 years old, standing on the brink of graduation. It's supposed to be the moment where your parents beam with pride, right? Yet, in my case, I didn't feel like I was giving up something crucial by not inviting them. Instead, I felt relief because they never really showed up for me. When I was in high school, they had this conversation with me. They told me that they had their own retirement to worry about, their own future beyond me. I was turning 18, and in their eyes, that meant I was on my own. It was time for me to figure out how to handle my own college tuition and expenses. They didn't even try to cushion the blow. I wasn't angry about it, though. I didn't want to beg them for money. I never had. In fact, I had expected this all along. My parents were always tight with their finances when it came to me, never willing to spend on me unless it benefited them somehow. I had learned long ago to stop expecting them to provide for me. I knew I had to take care of myself. So, I turned to my uncle, the older brother of my dad, and I had a conversation with him. He didn't hesitate for a second. He promised that he would take care of everything until I graduated and landed a job. My uncle and his family had always been there for me, in ways my parents never were. When I was younger, my parents would drop me off at their house, disappear for their own fun, and I'd end up spending my time with my uncle, my aunt, and my cousins. They were always there for me, no questions asked. My uncle, a surgeon, and my aunt, also a doctor, weren't worried about money. They didn't hesitate. They agreed instantly when I told them I needed help. They didn't even want repayment. They considered me their daughter, and helping me was something they wanted to do. It was simple, and it felt right. So when I got the opportunity to invite people to my graduation, there was no hesitation. I bought 3 tickets, one for my uncle, one for my aunt, and one for my cousin, who's also a close friend of mine. But my parents? They weren't even in the equation. I didn't think they would care, let alone want to come. They had barely been a part of my life for years. Sure, we lived in the same house, but that didn't mean we were a family. I would go home, but it felt more like living in a stranger's house than my own. They were too busy with their own lives, constantly out with friends while I'd spend time at my uncle's house, feeling more at home there than with my own parents. What really bothered me, though, was the hypocrisy. My parents claimed they couldn't afford to send me to college, but I knew, thanks to keeping track, that they were living it up. Fancy dinners, spontaneous vacations, and expensive outings with their rich friends. All the while, they claimed they couldn't afford me. It wasn't that they didn't have the money, it was that they chose not to spend it on me. I was never worth the investment, not in their eyes. Then, a few days ago, my parents asked who I had invited to my graduation. When I told them it was my uncle's family, they acted surprised, almost offended. They couldn't believe I hadn't invited them. And yet, for years, they had hardly bothered to even be in my life. Why would they expect to be a part of this moment? They had been mostly absent. So why the sudden interest? My dad quickly shifted into damage control mode. He wanted me to get tickets for him and my mom, claiming he had already bragged about me to his friends. If they didn't come, he said, he'd look like a fool. This is when the argument exploded. When I explained that I had already bought 3 tickets and that there was no room for anyone else, they completely lost it. They started talking about all the time and money they had invested in me. "We've invested so much in you," my dad said, like I was some sort of financial venture. It hit me like a slap in the face. The fact that they saw me as an investment, a return they expected from what they'd put into me, was beyond insulting. The truth was, they had barely done the bare minimum. And even that seemed like something they only did out of obligation or a desire to show off to others. They were never there for me the way they should have been. They made choices that affected me, without caring how it impacted me. And then, they had the nerve to claim that because they were investing in me, they deserved a seat at my graduation. I wasn't having it. I told them exactly how I felt, that they hadn't been a part of my life when it mattered, and now they wanted to show up just to make themselves look good. I reminded them of something they had told me long ago. When I turned 18, they made it clear that I was on my own. I was an adult. That was their word. To learn how to truly take care of myself, I had to flip the script. I turned the tables, confronting them with the harsh truth. Now that I'm an adult, I told them, I'm on my own. You made that abundantly clear when I was in high school, even before I stepped foot in college. You showed me you didn't care about me, and now you can't blame me for not wanting you around. The weight of those words fell heavy in the silence that followed. I was done. I had made my choice. I had my own family now, my uncle and aunt, people who had stood by me through everything. They had always been there, and now they were all I needed. My parents? They had no place in my life anymore. After I said it all, I ended the conversation abruptly, hanging up the phone with a finality that felt almost liberating. I blocked their numbers. It was time to stop pretending. For years, I had kept in touch with them out of some misguided sense of obligation. But now, after everything that had transpired, I didn't owe them anything. The anger simmered deep inside me, and I shared my frustration with my uncle. He didn't see any fault in my actions. In fact, he supported me, and that validation felt like a weight lifting off my chest. No second thoughts, no regrets. But then, yesterday, an email arrived. It was from my dad. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. According to him, the reason he never spent much on me was because he wanted to teach me humility. He didn't want to spoil me. All these years, he and my mom had thought our relationship was fine, and that they were just pushing me toward independence. They never realized I had misinterpreted their actions, thought they didn't care, but now, they saw the truth. They had lost me, to my uncle, of all people. And they were pleading for one more chance. They begged me to unblock them, to invite them to my graduation. They promised not to post about it, not to tell anyone, just wanting a chance to make things right. Desperation bled through the lines. They even pointed out that I had invited my cousin to the ceremony, but not them. It stung. It felt unfair to them, and they thought I should just buy one more ticket and invite them instead. But how could I? My cousin and I had always been close. We were more than family, we were friends. But the guilt, it gnawed at me. What if I was wrong? Their tone was sad, and it twisted something in me. I kept reading that email over and over, each time the words felt more hollow, but I still couldn't shake the guilt. Was I doing the right thing? Was I being too harsh? I didn't know how to answer that. I felt torn. But what was I supposed to do? Should I give in to their begging, even after everything? After all these years of neglect? In the edit I added, some people had asked why my parents had been so eager to brag about me. Well, the answer was simple. I was graduating from one of the most prestigious business schools in the state. It was a big deal, and I guess that's why they wanted to flaunt it. As for why I had stayed in touch with them for so long, I'd never really had anywhere else to go. I know my uncle would have taken me in, but I just didn't feel comfortable asking him at the time. I hadn't gone to him with the intention of him paying for my tuition either. He had volunteered to help cover all my expenses after I went to him about co-signing my loan. It was an act of kindness I'll never forget, and for that, I was eternally grateful. But the real reason I had kept talking to my parents? Obligation. I had gotten so used to being ignored by them that it became my normal. I didn't even think there was anything wrong with it. But now, after reading all the comments from others, it became clear I should have cut them off the moment I left for college. My attachment to them was built on memories, as it often is for kids. I can't fault myself for that, but I wish I had made a different choice. I added that explanation because so many people had questions, and I wanted them to understand. Then came the update. I was keeping my parents blocked. The overwhelming majority of responses to my post said I was in the right. I didn't owe them forgiveness. They hadn't apologized, not really. After reading their email again, I realized it was full of excuses, not remorse. They never actually took responsibility for their actions. Their tone felt all wrong, and deep down, I knew this wasn't about me, it was about their image. It wasn't genuine, not at all. I saw through the act. They wanted to impress their friends, nothing more. So, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to give them a chance. The idea of inviting them to my graduation felt increasingly impossible, and I knew it was never going to happen. So, they could give up on that hope. My uncle and aunt had flown in 2 days early, just to spend time with me. They had no need to rush. They were supposed to arrive on the day of the ceremony, but they chose to come early to be there for me. I was touched by that, especially since my cousin would still be arriving on the day of the ceremony due to some last-minute work. When they arrived, I finally had the chance to talk to them about everything. I mentioned how my parents had wanted to attend the ceremony, not because they cared about being there for me, but because they had been bragging about me to their friends. They needed to save face. My uncle wasn't surprised. He said it was typical of my dad. Apparently, he had always been obsessed with his image, even as a kid. He would surround himself with the wealthiest, most popular kids, despite coming from a family that wasn't well off. It was all about perception, always. And my mom? She was the same. She had always wanted to be seen as something she wasn't. Together, they had cultivated a shallow circle of friends, and he was right. Now, as I understood more about them, I could see it for what it was. Apparently, most of the people in his social circle were either caught up in affairs or shady business deals, yet they all paraded around as if their lives were perfect. It struck my uncle as utterly ridiculous how, even at his age, my father still cared so much about what these people thought of him. All this at the expense of the relationship he could have had with me. He shook his head, frustrated. "Can you believe that?" he asked. "All for the sake of superficial appearances." Hearing him speak about it made me feel better about my decision. Any lingering guilt I'd been carrying just vanished. There was no need to entertain my parents' fake persona, no reason to feel sorry for not inviting them. I didn't owe them anything, and the weight of that realization finally settled in. I spent the next 2 days with my uncle and aunt, savoring the warmth of being with people who genuinely cared for me. But there was still a nagging worry in the back of my mind. What if my parents tried to pull something on graduation day? It wouldn't surprise me. They'd done it before. And then, graduation day arrived. What a day it was, one I had been dreaming about for so long. Everything went smoothly, and I couldn't have asked for a better ceremony. I felt proud, elated, as if the world was mine. But, as we left the venue and headed to a nearby restaurant to celebrate, my phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. It was from relatives, too many to ignore. My uncle, aunt, and cousin were all receiving the same messages. Apparently, my parents had taken to social media to share their side of the story. And from what I was reading, it seemed like they had been busy painting me as the villain. My parents were ranting about how awful I'd been to them, how my uncle and aunt had stolen me away by brainwashing me against them. Their accusations spread like wildfire, as relatives began sending us screenshots of the posts. I had blocked my parents, so I couldn't see the post myself, but everyone else had. The text was full of nonsense, claims that had no grounding in reality. They said I had always been an entitled brat, that I had been demanding my parents pay for my tuition just because they had done so for my cousin. They argued that they wanted me to be independent, that it was their plan all along to teach me humility by making me handle things on my own. But when I didn't take that as a challenge and instead went to my uncle and aunt for help, they twisted the story, turning it into some sick narrative of brainwashing and manipulation. The post was full of distortions. They went further, claiming that my uncle and aunt were jealous of them and had treated me like a surrogate daughter because they had lost a baby years ago, before I was born. According to them, I was somehow filling the void left by that loss. My heart sank. The rest of the post was pure fiction, but that part, it was the only piece of truth. My aunt had miscarried before I was born, but the way my parents twisted it, as if my uncle and aunt were playing some twisted game with me, was sickening. The thought that my parents would make such a public spectacle of it, drag my uncle and aunt's name through the mud in front of everyone, it made me seethe with anger. The post was ridiculous, but the cruelty behind it made me feel nauseous. I almost unblocked them, ready to give them a piece of my mind. But then my uncle stopped me. He told me, "Don't bother. It's not worth your energy. Let me handle this. You stay out of it." It was hard to accept, but I listened. He was right. Responding would only give them more power over me. Everyone in the family knew exactly what kind of person my father was. No one would take his words seriously. The relatives sending us those screenshots weren't trying to stir the pot, they just wanted us to know what was happening. I didn't need to react. So, I let it go. We went to lunch and carried on with our day, as if their post never existed. That was the best way to handle it, I thought. I was sure my parents were seething that we didn't even acknowledge their pathetic attempt to stir drama. But honestly, I couldn't care less. I had just graduated. The day was mine, and nothing, especially not my parents, was going to ruin it. And that's exactly how I chose to leave it. I never checked if they took the post down, nor did I care. What mattered was that I had an amazing day, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since graduation, and life's been a whirlwind. Job applications, interviews, and settling into a routine, my focus has been entirely on the future. No time to dwell on the past. No time to waste on what's happening with my parents. College is over, and I've moved back to town, but there's no way I'm stepping foot back into their house. Instead, I've been staying with my uncle. From what I gather, my uncle had a talk with my dad about that post, the one they had put up online. Apparently, the conversation got heated. My uncle made it clear that if the post wasn't taken down, he would take legal action, even threatening to file a defamation lawsuit. He didn't actually plan to go that far, but the threat worked. It was enough to get my father to take the post down. But here's the kicker: one would think that after all that, my parents would finally let it go, leave me alone. Wrong. A few days ago, they reached out again. They must have found out that I was staying with my uncle, maybe even that I hadn't gone back to them after graduation. They're not stupid, and they certainly know how to get around a block number. So, they did what they do best. They made a new email account and sent me a message. They wanted to talk about what was going on. That was 4 days ago. And, predictably, I didn't respond. I wasn't about to indulge them. But then, a couple of days ago, I made the mistake of not blocking them fast enough. Curiosity got the best of me. I opened the email. And, to no surprise, it was more of the same: accusations, finger-pointing. They were disappointed with my behavior, they said, and that my uncle was manipulating me. They claimed he and my aunt were sick in the head, that they were out to steal me from them. And I rolled my eyes. Blah, 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 I thought. Here we go again. But then, just when I thought I couldn't be more disgusted, they wrote something that made my stomach turn. They said that my uncle had threatened them with legal action over that post, and that obviously meant he was hiding something. And then they went even further. They said that the reason my aunt lost her first baby was because, in their words, she wasn't fit to have a girl. They even went as far as to claim that God took the baby from her because he knew she wasn't right for a daughter. I can't even begin to explain the depth of that cruelty. The words didn't just cut deep, they left scars. I couldn't hold back anymore. I wrote them back, letting them have it. I told them, in no uncertain terms, that they were the ones who were sick in the head, not my uncle and aunt. That I was living a better, healthier life with them than I ever could have with them. I told them I didn't want anything to do with them ever again. And if they continued to harass me, I would take legal action. I would file for a restraining order. I blocked the email address and, just like that, the silence returned. I didn't tell my uncle or aunt about the email. I didn't want them to know how awful my parents were being. They don't deserve that kind of hurt. But I needed to talk about it, to get it off my chest. So here I am, letting it out. Maybe it's cathartic, maybe it's just necessary. Either way, I'm done. I know where my loyalty lies. I know who has been there for me, and that's all that matters. My parents can believe whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. It doesn't change the truth. And it's not going to affect me anymore. Update 4. A couple of months have passed since then. I've got a job now. I'm living on my own, learning to enjoy the little things in life. A few weeks ago, I moved out of my uncle's apartment. It wasn't easy saying goodbye, but I'm just a short distance away. I can visit whenever I need to. And honestly, things are looking up. I haven't heard from my parents since that last email, and I don't expect to. Part of me feels relief in that silence. They're still surrounded by the same crowd, people who, quite frankly, don't seem to add anything of value to their lives. But who am I to say? They're spending their retirement fund trying to impress people who probably don't care. Good luck with that. I'm moving forward, not looking back. They can do what they want. I'm not their responsibility anymore, and they certainly aren't mine. If they end up broke and on the streets, I won't be there to help them out. But I'm not dwelling on that. Things are going great for me. I'm thriving. I'm building my own life, and that's all I need to focus on. The past is behind me, and I've never felt freer.